They called him the Say Hey Kid, a name that sounded playful, even innocent. But behind it stood one of the most ferocious athletes the game of baseball has ever known. Willie Mays was not just a star. He was the very definition of a five-tool player. He could hit for power, hit for average, run with blazing speed, throw with a cannon arm, and patrol center field like no one else before or since. In the fall of 1954, in the cavernous Polo Grounds, Mays turned his back to home plate, sprinting full speed into the outfield. With the World Series hanging in the balance, he made a catch so improbable, so breathtaking, that it would forever be known simply as the catch. That single moment froze him in time as more than a ball player. It made him a legend. 660 home runs, 24 All-Star selections, 2 Most Valuable Player awards, 12 Gold Gloves. A resume that belongs on another planet. And yet, the numbers alone cannot explain why fans still whisper his name with awe. Willie Mays was more than his statistics, more than his trophies. He was the smile, the hat flying off his head as he sprinted the bases, the effortless grace that made the hardest plays look routine. He was the bridge between the Negro Leagues and the bright lights of Major League Baseball, a symbol of excellence during a time when America itself was struggling to live up to its promise. But here's the question that lingers decades later. Was Willie Mays simply the greatest all-around player in baseball history? Or was he something even larger? A living embodiment of what the game, and perhaps the nation, could aspire to be. Willie Howard Mays Jr. was born in May of 1931 in the industrial heart of Birmingham, Alabama. His family lived in the community of Fairfield, a working-class neighborhood where steel mills and coal mines shaped the rhythm of life. For a black family in the segregated South, opportunities were scarce. But baseball offered a kind of hope, a rhythm that beat louder than the grind of factory machines. His father, Willie Mays Sr., was known locally as Cat Mays, a semi-pro ball player who patrolled the outfield with a natural grace. His mother, Annie Satterwhite, was a high school athlete herself, a gifted basketball player. From the very beginning, Willie was destined to inherit a rare combination of athletic ability and competitive fire. But it was his father who put a glove in his hand before he was even in school. And from that moment forward, the game was stitched into his life. As a child, Mays played stickball in the streets until the light faded. Neighbors remembered the skinny boy who seemed to run faster than the other kids, who could hit a ball farther than anyone expected from someone so young. Segregation barred him from many fields, but it could not bar him from dreaming. By his teenage years, he was already making noise in Birmingham's rich baseball tradition. At age 15, while most boys his age were still playing for school teams, Mays joined the Birmingham Black Barons of the Negro Leagues. He wore the uniform of men, competing against seasoned veterans, and yet he did not look out of place. Fans came to Rickwood Field to see this high school kid, marveling at his speed in the outfield and his sharp eye at the plate. Growing up in the South during those years meant facing obstacles far bigger than a pitcher on the mound. But Willie Mays carried himself with joy, with an energy that made people believe in possibilities. Baseball was not just his escape. It was the language through which he would rise from a segregated town in Alabama to the grandest stages in America. The year was 1948, and Willie Mays was still just a teenager, balancing high school classes with playing center field for the Birmingham Black Barons. Scouts had already begun whispering his name, passing reports along big league offices about a kid who seemed too polished to be real. He could chase down line drives as if guided by instinct, throw frozen ropes to any base, and hit pitchers twice his age. One of those scouts was Eddie Montague of the New York Giants organization. Montague had seen enough young players to know the difference between talent and destiny. When he watched Mays glide across the outfield grass and fire a strike to home plate, he realized he wasn't just witnessing another prospect. He was seeing the future. In 1950, the Giants signed Mays for a contract that would change everything. It was a chance to move beyond the constraints of the Negro Leagues and onto the national stage of Major League Baseball. For a black teenager from Alabama, only 3 years removed from Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier, the moment was staggering. But for Willie Mays, it felt inevitable. He began his professional climb in the Giants minor league system, dazzling crowds in Trenton and Minneapolis. In 1951, still barely 20 years old, Mays was called up to the big league club in New York. His first days were not easy. He went 1 for 26 at the plate, and doubt began to creep into his mind. But manager Leo DeRocher pulled him aside, telling him, "Kid, you're my center fielder. Don't worry about the hitting. You'll be here as long as I'm here." That vote of confidence steadied him. Soon enough, Mays broke out, hitting towering shots into the Polo Grounds bleachers, patrolling center field with a magician's sense of timing. In a city already in love with baseball, he became a new kind of hero. Young, electrifying, fearless. The turning point was not just about making it to the majors. It was the moment Willie Mays proved to himself and to the world that he belonged. By the early 1950s, Willie Mays had transformed from a teenage sensation into the face of the New York Giants. His career exploded in 1954, when he won the National League Most Valuable Player Award and led the Giants to the World Series. That October, in Game 1 against the Cleveland Indians, Mays made the play that would define not just his career, but an entire era of baseball. Running full speed with his back to the plate, he tracked down Vic Wertz's deep drive to center field in the cavernous Polo Grounds. Over the shoulder, on the dead sprint, he made the catch, then turned and unleashed a perfect throw back to the infield. The stadium erupted, and the play was etched into baseball's memory as simply the catch. But the catch was only a snapshot of what made Mays extraordinary. He wasn't just a fielder who could cover impossible ground. He was a complete ball player. With the bat, he combined power and precision. In 1955, he hit 51 home runs, cementing his place among the league's most feared sluggers. With his legs, he became one of the premier base stealers of his time, swiping 338 bags in an era that did not emphasize the steal. With his glove, he captured 12 straight Gold Gloves beginning in 1957, setting the standard for what excellence in center field looked like. When the Giants moved to San Francisco in 1958, Mays carried the franchise on his back, becoming the bridge between New York's past and California's future. In the Bay Area, his legend only grew. He won his second MVP award in 1965, led the league in home runs 4 times, and consistently finished among the leaders in batting average, on-base percentage, and slugging. By the end of his career, he had amassed 660 home runs, over 3,000 hits, more than 1,500 runs batted in, and a batting average that hovered near .302. Mays' style was as
Meta Sex 0.05. As he approached his late 30s, Mays had already secured his place in the pantheon of the game. But like all legends, time eventually caught up, and the years ahead would bring new challenges and a different kind of test. By the close of the 1960s, even the say-hey kid could not outrun time. Age began to chip away at the speed that once made him glide across center field. His batting numbers, though still respectable, no longer carried the same thunder. Fans who had once seen him as invincible now watched him battle the reality that every athlete eventually faces. In 1972, after more than 2 decades with the Giants, Mays was traded to the New York Mets. The move stunned the baseball world. In San Francisco, he was more than a player. He was an icon, the face of a franchise that had grown up with him. Wearing another uniform felt almost sacrilegious. For Mays, the trade was bittersweet. Returning to New York offered a kind of homecoming, but it also meant confronting the twilight of his playing days under the harsh lights of Shea Stadium.
There were flashes of the old brilliance, a clutch hit here, a diving catch there, but the decline was undeniable. By the time the Mets reached the 1973 World Series, Mays was 42 years old. His reflexes dulled, his body weary. In Game 2, a misplayed fly ball in the outfield became a cruel reminder that even legends are mortal. Critics pointed to the mistake as evidence that he had stayed too long. The image stung. For a man who had built his career on grace and perfection, to stumble in front of the world felt like a betrayal of the very myth he had created. But beneath the frustration lay a deeper truth. Willie Mays was human. And in that humanity, in the struggle to hold on to the game he loved as long as possible, fans could see the cost of greatness. The crisis of his final years was not scandal or disgrace. It was the simple, universal heartbreak of time catching up. And it forced baseball to reckon with the reality that even the brightest stars must eventually dim.
When Willie Mays finally walked away from the game in 1973, he left behind more than numbers in a record book. He left behind an image, a feeling, a living reminder of what baseball could be at its very best. Fans still speak of him as the most complete player the game has ever known. 660 home runs, over 3,000 hits, 24 All-Star appearances, 2 Most Valuable Player awards, 12 Gold Gloves. And yet, ask anyone who saw him play, and they will tell you that statistics alone could never capture the experience of watching Willie Mays. He was the joy of baseball personified. Long after his retirement, his influence rippled through generations. Young players studied his highlight reels, trying to mimic the over-the-shoulder catch, the smooth swing, the fearless base running. For black athletes in particular, Mays stood as proof that greatness could transcend barriers. He was a bridge from the Negro Leagues to the modern game, a man who carried the weight of history without ever losing the smile that made fans fall in love with him. In 1979, he was inducted into the Hall of Fame on the very first ballot. The ceremony was not just a celebration of his career. It was a recognition that baseball had been made richer, deeper, more beautiful because of Willie Mays. Even decades later, when he appeared at ballparks frail with age, entire stadiums rose to their feet, because seeing him was like touching a piece of history. He is remembered not only as the Say Hey Kid, but as a symbol of excellence, resilience, and grace. His name is carved into monuments, but more importantly, it lives in the memories of millions who saw him play or heard stories passed down. Willie Mays once said, "When I played ball, I tried to make sure I did the best I could, day in and day out. And I did." That simple declaration explains why his legend endures. He gave everything he had to the game, and in return, baseball gave him immortality.